Hey guys, what's up? I'm here with another one of these informal kind of thoughts on reviews. Um, this one is on the recent remake and or reboot of Suspiria. I kind of wanted to just say, like I said with the last one of these I did with Halloween, I just really want to say that this is going to be drawn out, a little long, a bit rambly, because I'm doing this off the top of my head and I am essentially just kind of trying to do a free flow, get the thoughts out there kind of thing, um, without it being too formal. The only reason I'm sitting now is because I'm fucking tired and I really just don't want to stand because my back hurts. So, yeah, that's the only reason I'm not standing. That because the lighting is awful when I stand. So, either way, so Suspiria is a 2018 supernatural fantasy drama horror film, um, from a director whose name I remember but can't pronounce, so I'm not going to try. But he directed the movie Call Me by Your Name from last year, which was a movie I haven't seen yet. It's on my list, but it's one that I think like won an Oscar, or was at least nominated for a few of them. And from what I've heard, it's a very good drama, um, about like how true love isn't real, and it's apparently pretty depressing too. Either way, so we have this movie, his first horror movie. As far as I know, it's his first horror movie. I haven't seen anything else in his filmography. And here we have his film that is a remake of the Dario Argento film Suspiria. So if you've seen Suspiria, you know the plot of the movie. You know what this movie is about essentially, but it's very different, and that's where the discussion portion at the end of the video, where I get into spoilers, is going to be kind of discussing. But either way, this film is about Susie Bannion, a young American woman who is sent to a school for dance in Germany, and there seems to be some creepy shit going on that may or may not involve witches inhabiting the school. Um, so yeah, this is a really great movie, and I just highly recommend you see it. In general, it's a legitimately amazing, very great little film. I only have a few small problems with it, and those problems are almost all of them are spoilers, so I'll get into them later. But the movie is very well acted. Everybody turns in really good performances. Dakota Johnson, who is Susie Bannion, is very great. Tilda Swinton, who has a pretty big role in the film, is also very good. And even Jessica Harper, who was the original Susie Bannion, has a cameo in the movie, and her role is not too big, but it's not microscopic either, and she does a good job as well. The entire cast is pretty damn good, and they all can act very, very well. The writing is damn good, and it's really great to see a story that's as interesting as Suspiria finally told with some legitimately great writing. Uh, the camera work, everything from a technical standpoint is absolutely amazing. It's a very visually it's a very visually beautiful film, but not in the same way the original is. Uh, it's very well shot, and the look of like 1970s Berlin is very good. They did a great job of recreating late 70s Berlin for this film, and that's something that I can really dig about this movie, is that it's very much a grounded in reality film, where it is heavily it's heavily set in the time, while the original Suspiria was, I think it was set in Germany. Um, while the original Suspiria was basically just kind of was just a movie that was set in Germany. They didn't mention, the conflict going on between East and West Germany and stuff like that. They didn't mention any of that in the film, and therefore the movie had a kind of otherworldly feel to it almost. This movie has a very good atmosphere. It's consistently creepy. It is very, very well paced. Despite being 2.5 hours long, I was not bored at all. I was glued to the screen the entire time. I was really into it. Uh, it's got a good atmosphere. It's got some great music. I don't know if it's as good as the music as Goblin's soundtrack to the original, but it's definitely very good. I definitely say it's not as memorable as the soundtrack to the original, because the original I can hear, like as soon as I think of it, I hear it in my head. The music in this film, other than like one or two tracks, I can't remember much of the music. I just remember it being very well done and very creepy. Um, what there is of gore effects are really good. Most of the effects are practical. There are some CG gore effects that happen, but they mostly happen in a very stylized scene that happens later in the film. So it doesn't look as bad due to the stylization of the scene. And it's not as noticeable either. But it still is kind of noticeable. I noticed it after a few minutes. So yeah, that's something I should be let that you should know. Uh, this is a legitimately great piece of horror cinema, and it's definitely among my top five favorite movies of this year. And I'll go ahead and say it. This is far better than Argento's version. Um, and this is coming from somebody who really likes Argento's Suspiria. And again, I will get more into um, that later on the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu, 10 being something like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. Suspiria sits at like I want to say maybe a 3 or 4 out of 5, maybe a 5 out of 5. Yeah, probably a solid 5. It's a pretty gruesome little film at times. There are some pretty intense, violent moments in the movie. Overall, this is an absolutely great movie, and I would highly recommend you check it out. If you are wary about checking it out, just know that this is a very subtle, uh, artistic film. It is not, you know, because I remember when this movie was first announced years ago, and they said that Chloe Grace Moretz was going to be in it, and everybody was freaking out about how it's not going to have the lighting and stylization of the original, and Chloe Grace Moretz is going to be Susie Bannion, and they're just going to turn it into basically a supernatural slasher film. Um, and that is very far from what we've got here. I'm sure that's to do with maybe because the directors and stuff got switched around quite a bit, and it was in production hell for a while, because I remember they announced this remake like forever ago. When I say forever ago, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give this movie like a solid 9 out of 10. Like, this movie is legitimately great. It is a great theatrical experience. It's very much worth seeing in a theater. Just be wary, because it is weird, it is artistic, and it is partially in French and German, um, with English subtitles. So that's also something that I have to bring up. Either way, if you don't want to get spoiled, stop watching now, because I'm about to bust into the spoilers, at least a little bit. Okay, so compared to the original film, this new version is very different, and that could be a good or bad thing depending on the kind of person you are. Because there are people who go see horror remakes and they complain, oh, they completely changed that, kind of like how they changed Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake from being a child murderer to just a straight up child molester. Some people thought that that was a good way to go with it, to keep the character still, villainous and disgusting and evil, while others were like, no, this character's this character's supposed to get killed for being a child murderer. And that's kind of what this movie does, because it tells the same basic story with the witches being in a school for dance, but it's very political. There is a lot going on in the background of the movie that involves stuff with, like, terrorists in Germany and the Berlin Wall and shit like that. There is there's a heavy focus on dance in this film, If you've seen the original Suspiria, you know that it relies that the movie being set in a school for ballet. This isn't a school for ballet in the remake, mind you. It's only set in a school for ballet, so that way they could have a lot of you know attractive young Italian women to murder for the film. That's basically why it was set in a school for ballet. Um, and the dancing aspect of it plays almost no part in the original's plot line at all, other than a couple small scenes. The dancing plays heavily into the plot of this movie, and that's something I really appreciate about it because instead of just, doing what the original did, which was just kind of half ass it and not really have it in there much at all, this movie went out of its way to really do some awesome scenes involving all this dancing, and it's very well choreographed. There's a lot going on, and you can tell that by watching the film that they trained and did these fucking dance routines over and over and over again to get them right. And that's something that I can really respect and admire about the film. The movie runs for about 2.5 hours, and a lot of people I heard originally were complaining that the 2.5 hour long runtime was too much time to tell such a simple story. And it is, but there is a lot more going on than in the original. In the original film, and don't get me wrong, I love the original. Um, People are very quick to defend the original, and for good reason. It is a very good movie for what it is. It is very well shot, and the lighting is great, and the music is great, and a couple of the death scenes are really satisfying. But from the standpoints of writing and acting and character development and actual depth of plot, it's very, very shallow and paper thin. And I will say it again, I am a fan of Suspiria, of the original Suspiria. I love the movie. It's a movie I enjoy quite a bit. But Susie Bannion as a character is absolutely fucking flat and lifeless. If it wasn't for the fact that Jessica Harper is a semi decent actress and the fact that she's pretty good looking, the character would have almost nothing going for her at all. In this film, they really flesh out the character of Susie Bannion, and you know more about her because in the original, dance uh, she's just some ballerina from the U.S. In this movie, she is a just a dancer from specifically Ohio. So represent on that shit. When she said she's from Ohio in the movie, I was like, oh hell yeah. But she's specifically from Ohio. Her mother is like sick and dying, um, and she's like absolutely pretty much obsessed with the teacher with the dance instructor who pretty much runs the school, Madame Blanc, who's played by Tilda Swinton. And she mentions that she went to go see Madame Blanc's show in town like 3 times, and out of the 3 times, she hitchhiked twice because she absolutely had to go see it. Um, Susie Bannion as a character is very interesting, and the choices she makes in the movie are interesting. They're very different from the choices made in the original, and in a weird way, she's not even the main character of the movie as much as some of the other characters are. For instance, there's a character who is a psychiatrist, and he plays a very big role in the film. In the original Suspiria, there's that classic scene at the very beginning, the best death scene in the movie, honestly, where the girl is murdered. When she's when she's leaving the school and everything. Well, in this remake, they don't show that, and and the movie actually opens with her going to see her psychiatrist, who she talks to and essentially tells him, like, there are witches at the school, and they're going to get me, and they're going to get you. She even says, in actual dialogue, she says, they'll hollow me out and eat me bare to the cunt. Um, that's something that is said in the movie. And Yeah, and then that character disappears for pretty much the next 2 hours of the film and doesn't show up again until the last, I want to say, 30-40 minutes of the movie. Um, it's a very mysterious and weird movie because instead of people just straight up getting murdered a good amount of the time, a, or sometimes, instead of it being like the original where people were just getting murdered, it's more people are going missing, and the witches at the school obviously have something to do with it. It's a really, it's just so fucking good, and it's very different from the original because the original just kind of got straight to the point with it. It played it out a bit. It was paced pretty well, but it didn't burn as slowly as this one did, and then it didn't burn like this one does, and it didn't give the reveal of them being witches as much, I guess, intensity because it's a pretty intense movie at times too. There are a couple death scenes that are pretty uncomfortable and legitimately made me squirm a little bit. Oh God. The problems I had with this movie, and these are very minor, are the ending to the film is a little bit like it's an ending that I can appreciate because it's very different from the original. In the original, Susie escapes the school and everything, and I'm pretty sure I haven't watched it recently, but I'm pretty sure the school like burns down or falls apart or something. But I remember Susie Bannion escaping the witches and the movie ending. In this movie, she doesn't escape. She actually accepts her fate as being the new vessel for the mother Suspirium, one of the three mothers, which again the three mothers trilogy, which is Suspiria, Inferno, and the Mother of Tears. She actually accepts her role as the new host of the Mother Suspirium, which is very different from the original, and it's something that I can really appreciate because it's a pretty dark, down note ending. And the movie ends pretty wildly too, with there being a giant naked dancer like witch ritual orgy involving exploding heads and body horror. There's also some pretty cool body horror scenes in this movie too, which I did not expect that going in to a remake of Suspiria. That was the last thing I would have expected from a movie that is essentially a bit of a reimagining of Suspiria was body horror elements, but there are body horror elements in this film. But yeah, essentially she accepts her role and then she goes to the psychiatrist who is upset because his wife disappeared years ago during World War II, and his patient died, and he had a witness, and he was there, and he witnessed this massive witch demon orgy, and Susie shows up to him and essentially erases his memories, and that's kind of it, and he doesn't remember any woman he ever met in his entire life, um, and that just seemed a bit weird and out of character. But that's just a kind of minor thing that bothered me. Something else that bothered me is there are moments in the film where Susie ends up seeing this weird kind of, I guess, spirit. It's just like a ball of shifting light that's constantly like fucking moving around. And I forget. I think the original had something similar to that going on. I can't be too sure because again I haven't watched it recently, but either way, it felt a little too ridiculous for the film's overall serious tone. Um, but it didn't break the movie, mind you, because towards the end it gets really fucking wild, and I just kind of straight up accepted that it got that fucking wild because I had heard it was really crazy, and it is a very different movie. Like other than the basic plot outline being, Susie Bannion, American dancer, goes to a dance school in Europe, and there are witches at the school, and the title being Suspiria. those are the only similarities between these two movies, which makes me have to say that these movies cannot really be compared that much because they're so different. Even though I did just kind of compare them, and I'm going to continue to compare them a little bit. So, um, there are a lot of movies out there, a lot of old horror movies that, even though horror remakes more often than not are bad ideas, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, One Missed Call, The Grudge, etc., etc. Even though these movies end up more often than not bad, there are some old horror movies that I think could actually really benefit from a remake that could really help them build upon the aspects of the build upon the aspects that they had that were awful. You know, movies like Zat, The Corpse Grinders. I would love to see a very serious and well done and creepy remake of like Manos: The Hands of Fate. That would be really cool to see it done well. There are a lot of old movies like that, and Suspiria is one of them. I'm not saying Suspiria is anywhere near as bad as The Corpse Grinders or Zat or Manos or Anthropophagus or anything like that because it's a really good movie for what it is. But like I said, the original Suspiria, there's no good writing or acting or character depth. And I get that it's a giallo and you're supposed to look past that. And I can look past that personally because I do really like the movie. But at the end of the day, when I'm criticizing movies, I have to, kind of take that into a bit of consideration um, when saying like this movie is legitimately great. So, a lot of people were quick to jump on the hate bandwagon for this movie. Not just as soon as it was announced, but once the trailers dropped, I heard some people say that essentially this movie is going to be 2.5 hours of artsy bullshit using the name Suspiria as an excuse to do it. And it, they were kind of right, but I mean that in the like most sincere, nicest, like it's really great way possible because it is artsy and weird and surreal and creepy. But it's very obvious by watching the movie and by looking at it overall that the movie didn't want to just rehash Suspiria and do the colorful lighting and the soundtrack by Goblin and everything. It wanted to do its own thing and leave the very great aspects, which are a lot of the technical leave the absolutely amazing aspects, those being the lighting and a lot of the camera work and stuff like that, leaving that to the original and have this movie have its own very different visual aesthetic and have it, improve upon the things in the original that were lackluster, the writing, acting, characters, etc., etc. Um, and that's very much what this film did. It is a great improvement on the original, and this is coming from somebody who loves the original to death. I really really love Suspiria. I do honestly think if it wasn't for the technical aspects, the movie would have been forgotten. Um, but I still try not to hold that against it. I still think it's a legitimately really good movie for what it is. But Suspiria 2018, this just isn't a legitimately good movie for what it is. This is a legitimately great movie, period. And that's essentially all I have to say about Suspiria, at least off the top of my head. Um, anyway, if you guys made it this far into the video, I do appreciate it. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded in like a week. I'm 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 very busy with some personal stuff right now. So I'm gonna go edit this beast, and when I say edit, I mean just throw an overlay on it and throw it up on YouTube. Anyway, guys, this is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews signing off. Peace.